Yeah, I actually don't know what to say now. Only that we have one amazing speaker left. Is also the reason why he's the last one. He's our keynote speaker.
Wait a minute, I'm not the last one? I'm not headlining?
No. It's a blog. It's actually a website that we've been referring to a lot with our... Thank you, Christian. So, okay, he's on stage, off stage. So the last speaker we have is Hulick from userbase.com, and it's a website that we have been sending to our startups over and over and over again. And for a matter of fact, I know that Christian is actually obsessed by the website. He's been studying it day after day after day to really get the onboarding going from dot.
Which you will see after you download the app.
Okay. The last one on stage is Samuel, so please give a warm welcome to Samuel, and I'm sure he's going to give an awesome presentation.
I don't think I'll ever follow another act like that. Okay. So, yes, I'm Samuel. I run a site called useronboard.com. Today, let's talk onboarding. Specifically, let's start with like an easy question, which is like, what is onboarding? If you ask a lot of people will say something along the lines of this, which is like an interface layered on top of another interface, meant to describe the interface that it's covering up. And I think this is a problematic definition of onboarding for a couple of reasons. One is that it's taking the entire spectrum of experience of onboarding with a new product and reducing it down to a single design pattern. And another reason that I think it's really problematic is because people really tend to hate this. This actually came up in my Twitter feed because somebody posted the screenshot along with the caption, "I think this app is trying to teach me a football formation." And so, and like in Mr. The person's defense, it does seem pretty verbose for something that's basically the functional equivalent of this. It's a garage door opening app. So it's there are problems here that I'd like to untangle and look at what your alternatives are, and just how to kind of take a step back and approach onboarding in general going forward from there. So, question of just being like, how do we get to this point? I think that there's a problem where a lot of times onboarding isn't really treated like an ongoing and evolving part of the product. Instead, if you're rolling out a feature or things along those lines, if you think of like getting up to speed with your product as going from 0 to 60, a lot of time is spent in the 60 state. Like here, where if you're designing a dashboard, it has all kinds of colorful data that goes back 6 months with interesting peaks and things along those lines, and there's so much that people can get out of it, and they've already made connections with their friends and integrated all the integrations, and everything's all up and running. And basically, if you're designing for it in this mode all the time, you're going to get to the point where it's time to launch, and oh, finally we get to ship this product. And it's like, oh no, everything's broken when there's nothing in there. We're just showing all these zeros and empty squares, and why is this happening? And I kind of use the metaphor of like, oh, it's kind of like the Apollo 13, when they had to get the air filter to fix with a sock, and you're just kind of jury-rigging things together, and it's a bit of a catastrophe in some ways. And so, I use an analogy like when you are flying in an airplane, if you're designing just for the flight experience, you wouldn't include a door on the plane because you don't need a door to fly, and you wouldn't include wheels on the plane because you wouldn't need wheels to fly. But at the same time, you know, the plane also has to get off the ground, and so if this is what you're providing to people, it's basically as useful as having no airplane at all. And there's really nothing here that's going to get you to that awesome experience of being able to fly a plane and get to where you're going and things along those lines. And so instead of approaching onboarding after the fact, after it's already been built, and kind of be like get in somehow, I guess, and like don't scrape the bottom because there aren't any wheels, could be really dangerous, might really want to watch out for that. Instead, how can we avoid the situation altogether and design a plane that is designed to both fly and take off? And so one really strong recommendation that I have is to start your designing where your users start their using, which is essentially saying, before we even get to the point of somebody being set up and having 6 months of data and everything, you know, if it's a social network, they already have all of these friends who have avatars that are all uploaded, everybody's connected, things along those lines. Instead of looking at designing for that end up and running power user state, start designing for how to welcome people and how to get them up to speed, because if you can't get them past that, everything else that you've designed doesn't really matter. All those bells and whistles and awesome experiences and Easter eggs and things like that basically don't exist because people aren't getting far enough to experience them. And so, interestingly, I've done a lot of research into onboarding, but also into video game design and filmmaking and things along those lines. And if you look at especially the early, really classic video games, like Mario Brothers, for example, the endings are just like terrible, just like embarrassingly bad. Like this one's like, thank you, all right, thanks a lot. Like, you know, you just battle through 8 inhuman worlds of like surreal enemies to save the princess, and it's like, we're done, like, okay. But you can tell that really as little design resources were applied to the end of the game, where frankly, even the people who were really interested in playing, few of them would ever get to. By contrast, you can see all kinds of design detail and attention was paid to the beginning of the game, because not only if the beginning of the game did work really well, it wouldn't really matter what the end of the game would be looking like, but especially so because if you're not nailing the beginning of the game, people aren't going to be making it 5 minutes into the game, let alone the 5 hours that it would take to get all the way to the end. And so really interestingly, I strongly recommend, there's a YouTube video breaking down the very first level of Mario Brothers. If you do a search for Mario Brothers level 1-1 on YouTube, it's 5 minutes and 43 seconds. I unhesitatingly recommend of just really diving in and saying, with basically no words on the screen, no interruptions, no educational breaks, anything along those lines, there's this completely intuitive way to go in and pick up the game, realize that you need to jump over things in order to have fun, that there are enemies that you want to avoid, so on and so forth. It's really, really amazing. It's something that I really aspire to as a designer to emulate when I'm creating software. And interestingly, when I went back to revisit the video, there's a gentleman named T Chaos itself who said, I didn't know that this much thought was put into the first level, and I didn't know I learned so much about the game while I didn't notice it was teaching me. And the idea of getting people to learn about your software without them realizing that they're being taught is, like I said, it's an ideal that I really aspire to and something that I keep in mind whenever I'm evaluating onboarding experiences in general. So, with that being the case, all due respect to the garage door opening app people, but I do think we can do better, and let's dive into some different ways that we can kind of weigh the pros and cons of different design patterns and put everything into a grander context. So, this being like a wall of tooltips, I typically don't recommend throwing up a bunch of instructions with arrows that are pointing to different sections. Tooltips in general, I'm not really a huge fan of, but if you're absolutely dead set on using them, there are different ways to approach it. Am I popping my P's? Should I move this a little bit, or? Yeah, no problem. We're good? Okay. So, in the case of Optimizely, they do tooltips in a righter way than for example, the wall that I recommended. There are a couple of subtleties here. One is that there's only one at a time, so that you're directing someone's focus at something in general instead of throwing up something like this, which is basically like a memory quiz of, I'll have to remember all of this about your interface in this non-obvious way whenever it becomes relevant to me, hopefully in the future. It's really unlikely that somebody's going to be putting that much effort into it before they've even gotten to experience anything. So here, oh boy, whoa. Okay. So here it's just one single thing for them to focus on. Another major aspect is that they're not just telling you what buttons do, they're actually trying to guide you into taking meaningful actions. So in the case here, instead of just saying, create new project, creates a new project, and then you click next, and then it's like, cancel, cancels, and you click next, and you just go next, 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 next through everything. Instead here, they're basically saying, this is where you go to accomplish this thing, do that thing now, and we'll continue to guide you through how to use our product that way. Another interesting thing is that once they get all the way through and they've guided you through the actions, that you've actually accomplished something. So in Optimizely's case, you're looking to create an A/B test. That's like jumping in Mario. Like if you don't do that, you're not using Optimizely the way that you're supposed to. And so you get to the end and you're basically all ready to go, where they say, congratulations, but it's nice also, like what a person would say, like congrats, it's warm and welcoming. You're almost done. Now's the time that you want to create your account. And so since you already have a test that's ready to go, it's a lot easier to say, okay, well obviously it makes sense for me to create my account so I don't lose the thing that I just made, rather than front-loading that and saying, before you can even get into our experience, we're going to need your email address and phone number and mother's maiden name and things along those lines. So here they're timing their request by delivering value ahead of time and then asking for value in return, as opposed to asking for value up front because we said so, things like that. And another so the psychological principle here is called loss aversion, which is basically that given two things of equal value, we value the one that we already possess 3 times as much as the thing that we don't possess. So if you and I both have coffee mugs, I'm going to like my coffee mug 3 times more than I like yours, and I'm also going to devalue yours by 3 times as much. So it's called the 9x effect, but basically what I already possess I don't want to lose more than I want to get something that I don't have. And so any opportunity that you can bake into your product experience to give people things that they don't want to lose, the more likely it is that they're going to continue making progress in the way that you want them to. Changing gears a little bit, I would really like it if we as product designers were a little bit more loss averse about the signups that we get. Every day, however many people here who have software, you're getting new people to sign up for your product, and the chances are that the numbers behind that around who's going to continue sticking around can get pretty grim. And so to dive into that, there's Dave McClure's Pirate Metrics, which are 5 stages of the customer lifecycle: acquisition, activation, retention, referral, and revenue. And if you take the first letter of each of those, it's R, like what a pirate says. And skipping acquisition, because that's basically happening before onboarding really starts in many ways. And going into activation and retention, this is really something that we can dive into and take a look at from a numbers standpoint. So basically, if we define activation as not losing signups or not losing new users, and retention as not losing active users, we can come up with some pretty handy definitions and kind of look at it from a back of the napkin sense. So, however, in the case of churn, which is a word that that's not fun. Like you might be like, oh, it's red, probably not cool. Maybe it's cool. Like maybe it's like this. Like it's not cool. Churn sucks, actually. Basically, it's any time that you're losing something that you have. So it might be revenue, it might be signups, it might be active users. Whenever you're churning those out, that's something that you really want to pay attention to and really identify what your churn rates are there. And so diving into retention first, if you look at the active conversion, it's basically if you charge for your product, it's when someone starts paying. Maybe they exited a free trial, things along those lines. If you don't charge for your product, it gets a little bit fuzzier, but you're looking at something like Facebook has 7 friends in 3 days, or Twitter has followed 30 people, but some sort of behavioral proxy that says once we've gotten, once you've basically done this much, it's really unlikely that you're just going to totally bounce out. So whatever that point of conversion is, if you're looking at like what a churn rate that you should be kind of holding yourself against would be like 5% month-over-month churn, where you're retaining 95% of your users month over month. If you're dipping anywhere really below that, it's probably time to pull the brake line and say that we have a really leaky bucket on our hands and we should figure this out. Ideally, if you can get it up to like 2%, 1%, that's really a number that you'd be a lot more comfortable with. By contrast, if you look at activation, which is a lot closer to what you could typically consider to be like the primary onboarding phase, you go from sign up to conversion, because that stage came before the retention stage. And here you're looking at something like 15% of the people are who you're continuing to retain, or basically you're churning out 85% of your new signups. Depending on whether you lead with a credit card before the account is created or not, and all kinds of different variables in place. It could be 50-50, could be something along those lines, could be lower. But if you came up to me and said, guess my product's trial to paid conversion rate, 15% is typically what you'll see there. And so contrasting these two, and then making it even worse, is if you look at the number of people who just never log back in a second time. Like they've run this gauntlet of not knowing who you are, and then you're like plucked from obscurity and you're on their radar, and then they're thinking about using you, and then they're talking to their friends about maybe today's the day that I dive into Snapchat, but instead a cool TV show comes on and it doesn't happen. Like something happened, and finally today's their day to use your product, and like half of those people who made it through that unlikely process are just never even coming back a second time. So you're really, really losing a significant amount of people, and you can contrast that with the 95% that's typically considered like, if it's not this good, then you should be really concerned. And see that there's like a really big difference here, which means that there's a really large amount of opportunity to be retaining a lot more people than you are, or retaining the signups, not active users. And then this is the last time the slide gets sadder, but if you don't, it's not even just like 95 versus 15%, it's actually 95% of 15% because they need to become active users before you can even begin retaining them as active users. So the numbers get worse and worse and worse, and any small uptick that you can get in this stage can be really, really helpful from an economic standpoint for just the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, of just being able to get more and more customers through the door. Or users, if you don't, whatever customers being people who pay you, or you get paid to advertise to them, or whatever that might be. So, going back to Optimizely, there's one other element that I wanted to touch on with this design pattern, which is that I would really recommend, if you do have a tooltip tour introduction, really, really recommend designing it with the expectation that it's going to be skipped, because you're going to find that a lot of people just plow through this and just click next, 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 and then they're faced with what might be a blank set of circumstances, or just kind of an empty dashboard or whatever that might be, and then they don't know how to get the tooltip tour going back again. Maybe it's just gone forever at that point. So there's a lot of areas of concern there. Another example is like in the mobile world. There's hey, we can't wait to tell you all about us part, and then there are like these little dots at the bottom. I don't know if you can see with the contrast. But basically, it's like an indication of how many times you have to swipe left before you can actually start using the product, which is also the same gesture that you use to like say no to someone on Tinder. So it's like, okay, I'll just like dump you 5 times, and then I can get in and start actually using the product that I was hoping to use. But again, if a large amount of people are going to do that, then you want to have an experience that's still going to be really welcoming and still work really well. So thinking of these as a nice to have, but not providing crucial information, that crucial information is baked into your initial experience, is something that I would really, really recommend keeping in mind. But let's say you go through that experience, somebody lands in your vanilla product, nothing has happened yet. This is the term that I use, blank states or empty states, which basically nothing's been filled up yet, there's no activity to report, things along those lines. And I like live chat software, but I do pick on them for this part because it's kind of like walking into your own personal ghost town. There's like literally holes. There are 6 holes at the top, and then kind of a stern, sterile 4-word welcome, which is, you have no chat. Which is kind of like, I don't really think anyone would walk into Live Chat HQ and say, hey, I was thinking about using your product. Can you help me get started? And they'd be like, well, you don't have any chats. So instead of this, and another example is like YouTube. This was from 2007. You have no friends. Again, like not the best way to kick off a relationship. Instead, I'd really recommend choosing warm, human, and welcoming words. In Basecamp's case, they use the word welcome and then they end it with an exclamation point. So there's some perky enthusiasm right off the bat. And then they say, check out the sample project to explore Basecamp. Instead of, you have no projects, it's, we have already created a project that actually walks you through what projects are. And we do so in a really upbeat and chipper and familiar kind of way. And if you dive into the Explore Basecamp project, they get the project itself is even filled with different things that are helpful. So instead of saying, this project has no to-do lists, there's a to-do list explaining to-do lists, and it's like drag me up and down to reorder me, and click the X button to close this off and cross it off, and things along those lines. And so it's kind of like on a cooking show where they're like, here's what I prepared earlier, where they're showing you this is what it looks like when you're up and running, and they're modeling that behavior for you in that kind of way. Another example that people really, really love is Slack. So in the case of Slack, they say there's personality again, like, hey, Slackbot here. To make things easier for teammates, I can set up a few personal details for you. It's really humble that it introduces itself by saying Slackbot is pretty dumb but tries to be helpful. So it's definitely not like an arrogant, admonishing, cold introduction. It's very, very familiar, very human, and people create a really strong emotional bond with this product, and it's been really successful in a lot of ways. I think in at least some small part because of the details that they've gone into here. And the bar is so, so low that if you're looking, especially if you have any kind of B2B software, to be able to stand out and just be the one that's slightly more human and slightly more personable is really low. And it's basically just picking words. You can do it for free. You can just choose to be familiar, or you can choose to have, you have no friends. So, it's easy to make those improvements in that way. Once somebody has been fully set up with the product, really then the question becomes, what are the things that they should be doing right at the beginning and then also on an ongoing basis? One really strong recommendation I would make regarding onboarding is to not think of it as walking people through features or having them activate different things, but as designing them to come back and continue using the product and to become more successful people in doing so. So it's really not, although, I mean, the first 5 minutes are absolutely crucial, it's really not something that ends after somebody's had their first session and has gone off. Really, the idea is to get people back, not just set people up. And so in the case of Dropbox and LinkedIn, these are both examples where they have set out what I call progress trackers. In Dropbox's case, it's a to-do list that gets crossed off as you go, but you get to see your progress as you make it through, and it's not this all or nothing proposition where you can kind of choose what you want to work on when and keep going from there. LinkedIn uses a similar, a different design pattern for a similar outcome, where they show how complete your profile is. Here in this case it's 80% complete. Go update your job history or education or whatever that might be. But they're giving you discrete little quests to go on, and then also reinforcing your behavior and your accomplishments as you go by making it visible through either crossing it off or the progress bar goes forward and things like that. So thinking of onboarding in terms of getting people to make incremental progress through different accomplishments, as opposed to just clicking next, 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 because we just told you what all the different buttons do, can be really, really helpful. So going back to this chart, like if we're looking at how can we increase more people successfully making it from one side to the other, the question is really like, well, what's the driving force that's getting people to want to go through this to begin with? How can we really harness the motivation that they're already bringing to the experience and align our experience around that to be more helpful and get them to continue making more progress? And the question that I begin to identify is like redefining onboarding progress as not just making progress and setting up your product, but helping someone make progress in their life. That they're using your product to get from A to B in their life, not just to be good at using your product. And how can you take a step back and take a look at that and then align your entire experience around getting them to be the more successful person that they want to be, rather than just really good at using MailChimp or whatever that might be. And so in that case, I have kind of a story where it was years and years ago, and I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and she had she was a culinary chef, and so she made these like fantastic dinners every single night, really, really amazing. And I got to the point where I was like, all right, I need to show her that I care about her, so I was like, don't worry about it. Every Sunday night, I'm going to cook for you. This is going to work out really well. Don't worry. And it did work out really well for 2 weeks until I was out of recipes and I had no idea what to do at that point. And so I was like, okay, I'll go out and I'll buy a grill. And that's like kind of manly. It'll be like a lot of experiments I can do. This should be pretty cool. I'm going to like get really good at grilling. And so sure enough, Weber, the company that I bought the grill from, has these setup instructions where they're like, this is how to assemble it. And it was pretty easy to assemble, and I got it out and I like put it on the patio, and this is the point where like onboarding was quote unquote complete because I had assembled the grill, I had put it together, and it was sitting there. But the problem is, it could have just been sitting there collecting dust and getting rusty, and I wouldn't have been any more successful as a person. I would be less successful because I had paid for it and taken the time to assemble it. And so by Weber's definition of success, everything was looking good. But by mine, things actually, like I needed to be able to grill outdoors and competently deliver food to this person that I cared about. And so, believe it or not, fortunately I did start using it, but believe it or not, like, things were a bit touch and go at the beginning. Like, sometimes things would come out well, other times I was, like if this is the grill, I was talking to my neighbor, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a fireball shoot out the bottom of the grill. And he was like, do you need to look into that? And I was like, yeah, we should stop talking. I should go over and address this situation. So, fortunately in my case, Weber had all kinds of other supplemental material where they have a website where they tell you like what temperature to cook food at, and mobile apps that give you recipes while you're standing at your grill, and YouTube videos showing you how to, cut a steak properly, not just how to operate a grill properly, and a really good cookbook. And all of these things really did help me get better at cooking outdoors, which is what I wanted to do, not just owning and assembling a grill, which was kind of the means to an end for that one to the other. And so thinking of onboarding in the same way is something that I really highly encourage you to do. And even more sweetly, I think maybe my outdoor cooking skills had something to do with me being able to convince my girlfriend to become my wife. And recently, this past summer, our 4-year-old got his own little grill, and we were able to grill together, and it was a very heartwarming story. And so really looking at it from this perspective of like, instead of thinking of onboarding as the assembly of your product and an early stage in your overall product experience, thinking of your product as some small part in an overall life experience, and spreading your onboarding out to facilitate that as much as possible, and using that as the context to wrap everything in. So another example, people seem to like this illustration that I came up with, but the idea of, if there's like a runty, stressful Mario, he's trying to make his way through the world. If he touches anything, then he'll die. It's really like a fearful existence. He encounters a fire flower, becomes the buffed out, fireball throwing, awesome Mario. Things are really looking good. Really, it's not so much about your product. Like, you don't go in talking about like, oh, it has a green stem and it's got like an oval flower shape, but instead talking about how awesome it is to throw fireballs and what kind of lifestyle you can upgrade people to is really the more substantial thing to do, and aligning your entire product experience around that instead. So, as a saying that I have, people don't buy products, they buy better versions of themselves in the same kind of way. Okay, so in that same sense, going back to like the question of what is the driving force of why someone would want to sign up for your product anyway, or like what is the expression of hope that they are communicating by like bothering to check out your product at all, really it's kind of a question of saying like, there's something in my life that I am a stressed out Mario about, and I would like to become a fireball throwing Mario. Better at getting dates through Tinder, or better at knowing when to get your oil changed, or better at something. And really the driving force is getting people to be better at that, and not just better at using your product. So, last thing, coming back here, one thing that you might also notice is that like a few of these are already checked off. A lot of times when you see progress trackers in the wild, they've already been kind of teed up with some gimme progress to make it feel like you've already made some of that momentum and you're already on your way to becoming that better person. And this is a psychological process called the endowed progress effect, where there was this really interesting study that they did, I believe it was in the 1970s, at a car wash, where they gave out half the people like loyalty cards to get a free car wash at the end once you punched all of the punches. And so they gave half the people a 10-punch card with 2 pre-punches, and then they gave the other half the people an 8-punch card with 0 pre-punches. So in both cases, you need to get 8 punches to make it all the way to the end. And the cohort that had the 2 punches ready to go, even though they needed the same amount, completed their cards at twice the rate of the people who started with no punches. Because basically, like if you look at 0 out of 8 punches, you're 0% of the way complete. 2 out of 10 punches, you're 20% complete. And so seeing this in the wild, Quora, actually takes this to an extreme where this is the very first time you can ever possibly see the screen. Like you're just being railroaded on everything. You don't get to make any choices before you arrive at the screen when signing up for them. And they have a 5-step list with 3 things already checked off. So this is basically, instead of a 2-step list with 0 items already done, it's a 5-step list with 3 items already done. So instead of being at 0%, you're at 60%. Like you're literally closer to being done than you are to being started by the time they show this to you, even though you had no choice whatsoever in the matter. So just total reframing and recontextualizing in that sense. Interestingly, when I saw this, I was like, oh, I'm almost done. This is great. I'm just going to Cora and I are going to be best friends, and they're going to love me because I'm just going to crank through this and get these last 2 things done really quickly. And I thought that I was going to get like a pat on the back at the end of it, and instead it just disappeared. Like once you've done the 2 things, it's like, Cora got what Cora wanted. We're out. Like there was no celebration or anything along those lines whatsoever. And so one thing that I really recommend is instead of taking this approach where they just kind of were like pieced out, basically, taking it as any opportunity to really celebrate success with your user. Shopify does a great job where once you've gone through their initial experience, they give you this page with a rocket ship taking off, and the whole background of the page, which you can't see because of the contrast, but there's like these like shuttle clouds from the exhaust of the rocket, and like it feels like this totally momentous occasion. And this could easily have just been no messaging or shop completed or setup complete, you know, or things along those lines. And instead, they really chose to make a moment out of it and really celebrate the success and basically say, hey, look at how much better you are now, brought to you by us, basically. But like, still, here we are together in this moment. Aren't we great? And in that same note, I would like to end on a high note myself. Thank you so much for having me. I would love to field any questions you might have.
Any questions? I see.
Any questions?
Hi. Actually, last week we created kind of a storyline for our tutorial. We have a 15-day tutorial for our software, and I think you're the perfect guy to. So I have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to ask, will you stick around for the after party and then to touch some ideas we have created last week?
Sounds like a plan.
Right. See you in 10.
That question was easy.
Okay. Any other questions?
How do you eat your ramen?
I don't. I ate so much of that as a teenager, I vowed to never have it again. So.
There was a question here or something.
Yeah, hi. I was just curious how User On Board came to be. And do you choose the projects you review, do you choose them by random, or is there actually any interaction with companies that you review?
Yeah, so I could probably answer both of those with a story, which was I one day wanted to, like as a consultant, or as a UX designer, I would go through and take screenshots of one of my clients' websites, and just go screen by screen and say, I would reorder this, or I would have this screen come in first, and basically kind of like what you would see on the website today. And I thought, in the same way of instead of guest blogging or trying to promote what I was working on by writing articles, that it would be more interesting to share those kind of things, which I would feel not cool about sharing